This is just a short video about me answering questions 11 and 12 on page 577 in the official SAT study guide. So I'm just going to read the passage and tell you what I think as I read it, and then I'm going to go through the questions and explain what I'm thinking as I answer the questions. Okay, so it says, Dr. Jane Wright insisted in later years that her father, Surgeon Lewis Wright, never pressured her to study medicine. Indeed, he warned her how hard becoming a doctor would be. So I'm just kind of paraphrasing that to myself and saying, this woman, Jane, became a doctor, probably. Her father was a doctor, but he never put any pressure on her to become a doctor herself. And it's actually the opposite, of him pressuring her. He said, it's going to be really hard. You might not want to become a doctor. His very fame within and beyond the African American community made her training harder in some ways. His being so good really makes it difficult, Wright told an interviewer soon after she graduated from medical school. Everyone knows who Papa is. So here she's just saying that her father left big shoes to fill. He did such a great job that it puts a lot of pressure on her to do well herself in the field of medicine. Okay, so then we can go down to the questions. The passage suggests that Jane Wright's medical training was made more difficult because... Okay, so we know from the passage they said his being so good really makes it very difficult. So we know that because Jane's father was a doctor, there's all this pressure on her to be a great doctor, just like he was. So we're looking for an answer that is something like that. So let's go through the answer choices. A, her father warned her not to study medicine. This is a very literal interpretation of the passage. It is true that in the second line it says, her father, Surgeon Lewis Wright, never pressured her to study medicine. Indeed, he warned her how hard becoming a doctor would be. But that's really too literal. Choice A, and it doesn't answer the question. That's not what made it difficult for her to become a doctor. It's actually that her father was such a great doctor. That's why it was difficult for her to be a doctor herself. Okay. B, her father flaunted his success. So we know that her father is successful, but we don't have any indication that he flaunted his success or showed off. For that to be the right answer, it would have to talk about how her father maybe puts trophies and awards all over their house or does something to flaunt his success. C, she did not spend adequate time studying. There's just no information about her not spending time studying. And we also know she graduated from medical school, so she probably studied at least some of the time. D, she shared her father's desire for fame. There's just nothing about her wanting fame. In line 4, they say his very fame within and beyond the African American community made her training harder. But she herself isn't said to want to become famous. So E is probably the right answer, but let's look at it and see if it is appealing. Okay, she was inevitably compared to her father. So inevitably means unavoidably, and there's a lot of implications here that she's compared to her father. Basically, the last part of the passage really shows you that E is the right answer because it says, his being so good really makes it very difficult, Wright told an interviewer. And everyone knows who Papa is, so that implies that it's difficult because everyone knows who he is, and then they're comparing Jane to her father, Lewis. So that one does require inferences and also requires that you avoid those excessively literal answer choices, like answer choice A. Okay. Okay, this is the answer to question 12 on page 577, so I'm just going to read the question and then work through the answer choices because I already read the passage in a previous video. Okay, so the passage is primarily concerned with Jane Wright's what? So for this, you might want to predict an answer. So basically what I would try to predict is just some of the qualities that the answer will have. So it's going to have something to do with her father. Basically, the right answer needs the word father in it, and then it'll probably have to have something to do with the fact that she's a doctor. So the wrong answers will probably emphasize that she's a doctor but have other elements that aren't true, or they'll emphasize that she cares what her father thinks, but they won't mention that she's a doctor. Okay, so A, views of the medical profession. So basically this is what I was predicting would happen, where they overemphasize the doctor side of the passage. So the passage is not concerned primarily with Jane Wright's views of the medical profession. It's concerned with her position within the field of medicine and the effect that her father's role as a doctor has had on her role in medicine. So A is not good, but I would say that it's probably the second best answer because it has the medical profession aspect of it. B, childhood recollections. That's not primarily what this passage is about. For that to be the right answer, you would see a lot of past tense remembrances of what Jane experienced as a child. So it would be something like Jane remembered her father showing him his stethoscope and blood pressure monitor and stuff like that. C, perception of her father as a role model. So this one has her father in it, which is great. Role model is referring to the fact that her father was a role model when it came to medicine and being a doctor. So this is a really good answer. This is probably the right answer. D, reluctance to collaborate with her father. This is close, but there's nothing about her specifically collaborating in a medical role with her father. It's just saying that there was pressure on her to be a great doctor because her father was a great doctor. So D is close, but it's not right. And then E, gratitude for her father's encouragement. Gratitude for her father's encouragement. Well, that would be a big logical jump because there's no information about him encouraging her except for through his position as a good role model for her. And in fact, he discourages her from becoming a doctor because in the third line it says he warned her how hard becoming a doctor would be. So E doesn't have a lot of support. So C is the best answer, perception of her father as a role model when it comes to being a doctor. Okay, so this is a short paired passage on page 588. So I'm just going to read the first passage and answer the questions, and then I'll read the second passage and answer the questions. I'll probably break it up at some point in here, so this will be a two-part video. Okay, so page 588, passage 1 says, farm families are able to achieve efficiency only through a brutal work schedule that few people could tolerate. So I do like to predict a little bit what's going to come in this passage, and I would say that it's probably just going to talk about how brutal it is to be a family running a farm and the details of the schedule. Okay, so then it says, the farm family does physically demanding work and highly stressful work at least 14 hours a day, often at least 18 hours a day during a harvest season. So it's implied the season's more difficult. 7 days a week, 365 days a year, without a scheduled vacation or weekends off, wrote Minnesota politician and farm alumnus Daryl McKigney. The farmer must endure all of this without any of the benefits that most United States labor unions demand. So there's a lot of contrast being drawn between farmers and everyday Americans in more traditional jobs. Traditional might not be the right word, but more mainstream jobs that more people have. So it's basically saying they have no unions, they have no people really looking out for them, making sure that their working conditions are acceptable. A farmer has to do whatever is necessary in order for the farm to function. Okay, picking up at line 10. A dairy farmer, for instance, cannot just take off for a 2-week vacation and not milk the cows. Farmers lose perspective on the other things in life, one psychologist has written. The farm literally consumes them. So this is about the farmer's role in society and their own personal life and how they don't have a lot of free time, they don't have a lot of freedom or flexibility with their job, and they just have to do whatever's necessary in order to make the farm function. So I expect that the next passage will maybe be from someone else's perspective, maybe a consumer's perspective, or maybe a farmer who likes their job, something like that, because we expect that there'll be a contrast between the two passages, and this first passage is making the life of a farmer seem pretty bleak and difficult. Okay, so let's turn to the questions. The first question is tough. We might not be able to get rid of anything just on the basis of having read the first passage. So it says, unlike passage 2, passage 1 is primarily concerned with blank. So actually we should be able to get rid of quite a few answers for this one because we know what passage 1 is about, and if we paraphrase this question, we can see that it's saying get rid of anything, any of these answer choices that isn't describing the focus of passage 1. So if it's not true of passage 1, get rid of it. So A, the ethical implications of food production. I'm not really comfortable getting rid of that yet because I think that passage 1 does kind of talk about the ethical implications of food production in the sense that it's discussing how difficult farming is for farmers. So in some ways that's making an ethical judgment saying it's not really fair that everyday workers have unions, at least many of them have the ability to have a union, which fights for their rights and makes sure that their working conditions are acceptable. So it's possibilities, right? B, harsh working conditions on many farms. That seems much more true to what passage 1 is about, so that one's very appealing to me because everything in passage 1 is primarily concerning how difficult it is, the actual working conditions on a farm. C, need for farmers to form a labor union. That one's really interesting because, yes, of course, they mention union, but this passage is not primarily concerned with the farmers' need to form a labor union. If you imagine what the passage would look like if that was the primary concern of the passage, it would discuss other unions, how those unions have been effective and how they've created better working conditions for different groups of people, like teachers or construction workers, something like that. So that one's kind of appealing, but it's kind of a classic wrong SAT answer where they grab one little fact or word from the passage and then they shift the focus of it and make it sound more significant than it actually is in the passage. Okay, D, plentiful and varied food available in the United States. That I would get rid of. Passage 1 is definitely not concerned with that. If that was the case, then the passage would be describing all the various foods that we have in America. E, beliefs of many Americans regarding farm life. I would even say you could get rid of that because passage 1 about the beliefs of Americans about farm life, it's about the reality of the farmer's day. So I would say get rid of E because passage 1 isn't about the beliefs of Americans. If it were about the beliefs of Americans, it would say something like many Americans believe, or consumers, when they're at the grocery store, think the food just magically appears there. It'd be something about the Americans' view. So as you can see, we got rid of quite a few bad answers. I mean, we at least got rid of D and E. We're pretty sure B is the right answer, but we'll have to read further to figure that out. So let's look at 7 and see if we can get rid of anything for question 7. Both passages serve to discourage the blank. So this is just saying, what do these passages speak negatively about, basically? So we can see if we can get rid of anything. A, reliance on polls for accurate information. There's no mention of polls in the first passage. They do give some data about the number of hours that the farmers put in, but they don't say that this information was acquired through a poll. So you can get rid of A, actually. B, desire of many farmers to take annual vacations. That's interesting because, well, let's just return to the question. It says, both passages serve to discourage the desire of farmers to take annual vacations. I would say passage 1 is not discouraging the desire of farmers to take annual vacations. It's actually saying farmers work way too hard and they never have vacations. They don't get to have vacation whenever they want. Their work schedules depend on the needs of the farm. So I would say you can get rid of B. C, tendency of Americans to buy inexpensive foods. Okay, so it's saying both passages serve to discourage the tendency of Americans to buy inexpensive foods. I don't know that you can totally get rid of that just based on passage 1. I mean, they don't explicitly say anything about the consumer's role in the life of the farmer at this stage, but it seems hard to eliminate this already. I mean,